Hey there, welcome to Data Democracy, a podcast where we explore ways to make data and AI more accessible to everyone. I'm really excited about today's guest. We have Christopher Chen joining us. Chris is a communications coach, data storyteller, and a TEDx speaker, and someone who's doing really important work for people in data and tech. He focuses on a problem a lot of us know too well, super smart, technically strong people with great ideas, but the ideas don't always land because of communication. I've actually been following Chris's work for a couple of years now, and we've exchanged a few messages on LinkedIn over time. The work he's doing is something that I personally relate to. English is not my first language, and growing up in India with a British version of English, I still spend a lot of time second guessing the words I use. I've always admired the simplicity and the directness of communication here in the US, but so his work really is helpful to me personally. Chris is the founder of Hidden Speaker, where he helps people turn great ideas into insights and messages that actually land. This is only becoming more important as the world of AI is taken over and AI does all the heavy lifting in terms of coding. So we're going to talk about communication as a real skill, storytelling with data, I think building trust and consensus, and of course his TEDx experience, and just basically what it makes to take your great idea and make it land. So Chris is grounded, he's amazing, we're going to have fun. Chris, welcome to Data Democracy.
Thank you so much, Vin. Really appreciate it.
No, I'm so grateful to have you on. I know we've been talking to each other for a couple of years over LinkedIn and other places, but I'm super excited.
Likewise.
Awesome. Yeah, let's start with your story, your path in tech and founding your company. But where did you get started? And tell me your story.
Absolutely. My career journey began away from tech. Before that, my focus was on music composition. Totally different from what I eventually became. But at my core, I'm a creative person. I'm an experimental person. I like brainstorming. I like seeing different creative ways to bring things together. And music was a perfect outlet for me to express that. Of course, music is also a difficult career to break into. You need to not only have the talent, but also the connections to elevate yourself and make the big films and short films and soundtracks that you want. So it wasn't as successful for me as a career because I was super introverted and shy. When I went into tech, I thought it was a perfect fit because now I found a career where there were many people like me, many people that were also shy and introverted that focused on the technical stuff. I felt perfectly at home. But what I soon began to realize was communication was essential here too. That we could have phenomenal technical work that's pristine, that's precise, but if you don't communicate it with emotion, with impact, with an idea of its significance, then it's going to fall flat when it lands in the leader's ears. So what I decided to do for myself was to work on this skill, to become masterful at it so that I could advance my career. And when I reached a point where I could then give back to the community and share everything I learned, that's when I decided to start my own company, and that became my mission since then.
No, amazing. I think it's really becoming more important as we realize, hey, machine can take over some of the technical stuff. So I think building consensus, communicating is only getting more important. And of course, I look up to leaders like Simon Sinek, Vin Jiang, and honestly you too. Who are kind of leading the pack in terms of hey, we just in business and also specifically in data, where we talk about it less and less. In terms of communication. It's really important, but no, appreciate the background. Why is this gap especially pronounced in data and technical roles, but more so in data? What do you think that is?
I think there are a variety of reasons for it, but one pronounced one for me is if you think of it spatially, for us as technical and data folks, we like to focus on the really nitty gritty stuff. The making sure every detail is correct, every comma is in place in the code, whatever it is. But in order to have impact on leadership, we need to also see the bigger picture. So you can imagine in that spatial world that I'm trying to paint, you need to have the ground to walk on that's really solid. You need to have really accurate and precise code or product or whatever it is. But you also need the sky and the stars to give you direction. You need to inform leadership not only what you've done, but why does it matter to them and what should they do about it? When you have all those pieces and you've created the full world for them, then that's when you have impact.
It's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I've personally uh, struggled with this and getting better at it because, so like you said, we're so in the nitty gritty. And then when you have to talk to others, you have to kind of wear a different hat, become a different person, and actually not think about the nitty gritties and think about the best way to tell your story. And and a lot of times I've realized, and tell me if this works for you, but we as data people go so much want to communicate all the details, but it's I've learned over the years that that's not the key. It's like make them ask questions is kind of the tool. So introduce ideas, make sure that people are intrigued and come back with more questions. I think that that's something I've learned over the years.
Absolutely. I'm working with a client now, and one of her first questions to me was, how do I know how much detail to give? And it's a complex question. And the answer is it depends on your audience. If we are speaking to technical people, then we can give a lot of detail because that's familiar to them. They're interested in it. But if we're talking to leadership who is not so much interested in the implementation, they're more interested in the strategy and execution, then we need to focus more high level. So it depends on your audience. And as you said, we have to listen. We have to observe their reaction to us. If they're starting to get overwhelmed and confused, then we stop, we change direction. But if it's just right and they're eager and listening, then that's the level that we go at.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think we have that's a underrated skill to know your audience and speak to them, meet them where they are in terms of technical details or even the project in general. I really like that. You talk a lot about communication as a teachable skill. Why the work will speak of for itself in a career limiting belief. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. As an analogy, you can imagine when you're writing code like SQL or Python or whatever it is, you need to use the right language to speak to the computer. Otherwise, it won't understand what to do. In the same way, when we communicate to people, we have to use the right language. And that doesn't just mean English or Chinese or Spanish. It means we have to use the language that the brain understands the best. And that language is emotion. Of course, logic plays a part in decision making, but emotion plays a really primary role as well. There were studies done by a researcher called Antonio Damasio. He found that when he looked at patients' brains that had damage to the emotional part, those patients were not able to make decisions very easily, like even what to eat or what clothes to wear. It became very difficult, and that revealed emotions play a central part in decision making. If you don't have emotion, then you logically try to analyze every single option possible, and that takes forever. Emotion lets you narrow down to exactly what you feel is best. That's not always the best technically from a logical standpoint, but that feeling allows you to finally make your choice. So in order
Yeah,
to have impact, we need emotion.
that's very important. And yeah, I think the brain wants to take the path of least resistance, and emotion is a hack that allows it to focus on what's important, right? So we're processing so much information every day, and more so now with TikToks and Instagram Reels and everything. So I think, and that's where you kind of see emotions being highlighted everywhere, right? In your news feed, in your TikTok, and everywhere. So I think we need to bring that in our work, but put it into a better use, more intentional and more altruistic. Hey, this is storytelling with data, not conceding or, getting more views on
Exactly.
online.
Yeah, the difficult part is we live in a world where people understand emotion is what makes people pay attention. So in every kind of media, they're capitalizing on that. TikToks, as you said, or short form videos, they have at the very beginning the most emotionally alarming thing to grab you in. That's not necessarily the most ethical approach always, and especially in business, we want to make sure we're doing things ethically, but also doing things purposefully and intentionally, as you said. We're not just using emotion to sell or whatever it is. We're using emotion to show people how we feel and then using that as an invitation for them to feel something similar.
Yeah, yeah. I think we can definitely learn from other aspects of life and apply that to, how do we make our jobs better. 100%. What does it mean to treat communication like a structured and learnable discipline?
Something I found interesting when people try to learn a new skill is if it's technical, we approach it from a technical standpoint, from a very structured standpoint. We say, okay, I'm going to learn how to code. I'm going to go to this website and go into their environment. I'll type out the code, I'll test things out, get feedback, see how I'm doing, and improve. But with communication, it's very different. We don't seek the same technical way of learning. We just talk and then we don't seek feedback, we don't seek improvement unless someone says to us, you need to work on communication skills. I think that's a big tragedy because then people won't work on communication to a large extent. We'll go our entire lives talking the same way and never knowing how to improve. So the way that I recommend communicating and learning communication is always seeking as much feedback as possible. Of course, in business, people are polite. They don't always want to give that feedback, but that's why having a coach is often sometimes necessary as a mentor or a guide to tell you, here's where you have some gaps, here's where you can enhance that, tweak that, and then become overall better and more masterful with your communication.
That's really key. Do you think um, there are some tips, quick tips like the rule of three or something like that that you could share with the audience?
The biggest tip I would give ties back to our earlier conversation about knowing your audience. Speak their language. Before you talk to anyone, take the time to understand two things. What are their pains and what are their priorities? If you understand their pains, that's what people care most about. They want to get rid of the pain, alleviate it. Then, if you address that as the very first thing, you have their attention in a meaningful way. Then priorities, where do they want to go? So you have this low point of pain, you have this high point of priority, and if your communication bridges that gap, that's something really solid.
That's very true. What makes making data sing you looks like? I know you talked about this in your TEDx talk and other places. What is the concept? And you talked about it a little bit, but can you tell more about it in terms of real life setting? How can real executives make data sing?
Of course. It's the subject of my TEDx talk, and it's that we need both data and emotion, which creates music together in order to have impact. And I tie this in the talk to Daniel Kahneman's theory. He's a famous economist, I want to say, or he was a researcher as well. And his major theory was the dual processing theory of mind, which states there are two modes of thought. One is a quick and intuitive mode, the emotional mode. That's very instinctual based on feelings and sensations. And there's also the slower and more logical mode that we use to make analytical decisions. Once you have both working together, that's how you really impact and connect with an audience. So in my talk, I talk about how when you present data, of course you need that level of the logical bit, here's what's going on, but you also need to connect that to the emotional part. Why does it matter? What do we need to do about it? As an example of that in an executive setting, early on in my career, when I was learning data storytelling, I was tasked with analyzing some data for the Department of Transportation. My big role was to publicize the department's work to the public, get them interested in what we did. I analyzed some data related to kids going to school. And I found some analysis about certain modes being more popular than others. I presented that to the executive. And they said, that's not a story. I said, how could this not be a story? I'm talking about the different modes of transportation. They said, you haven't included human beings in this story. All you focused on is the data and the transportation modes. And I said, that's when it hit me. I had my light bulb moment. I said, oh, it's not good enough to put data into a structure. And that's not a story. To be a story, you need relatable characters so that I can connect to it. I'm analyzing data about kids going to school, but I haven't even talked about the kids who are going to school. I need to include that. So I did more analysis and I found an interesting story related to lower income families who take their kids to school. By and large, the majority of lower income families in that analysis many, many years ago had private vehicles. However, those families did not use private vehicles to take their kids to school. Most of the time, those kids took the school bus. So I said, there's something interesting there. Further analysis revealed a suspicion of mine, which was, yes, those families have private vehicles, but they may not have the time and luxury to take kids to school despite that. So that's something really interesting. We can connect with that. Here are these kids who need to get to school. All kids need to get to school, but some families are limited in their ability to achieve that. That became the story. That's what impressed the executive. And in all the future situations I had, I found continually, it's when you include human beings in the story, connect that with the data, that you have something very powerful.
That is super powerful and something I don't see that's been used in the business, right? So how do you, I mean, we all have customers, whether, end customers or even if you're just dealing with internal customers, that you have a human connection there. Every day we go to work, we're solving human problems, right? So I think we need to bring those human stories along to the analysis to make your story resonate more.
Exactly. I was working with another client who was preparing a presentation with data. And I gave a similar argument to them that my executive gave to me. I said, hey, there's a lot of good data here, but there's not yet a story because we need human beings. And their data was related to how many people have clicked on this part of the site. And that was very analytical and very important. But I said, we need to also tie the customer. How does this impact people? So they updated their story to say, these are the people who are clicking on our site because they're interested in buying something, but they're experiencing a friction. They're not able to find what they want. What we need to do is update the website so that people can find the information they're looking for and not get confused. So they changed a certain button. That became the story. It's so important to not forget whatever data we're working with, there are humans somewhere in the value chain to include.
Yeah, that's so super key. Yeah, I mean, I think just pulling in, maybe a customer service call, explaining that in the beginning of your presentation could add so much depth and relatability to your analysis and presentation. That's something I'm gonna borrow from this conversation. Amazing. I've never thought of it that way, but it makes so much sense once you talk about it.
Yeah, it's easy when we work in tech to just focus on our area of expertise, which is the numbers. But then we need to remember there are people involved in all aspects of business. That's what business is all about.
I keep coming back to this, but your work is only getting more important as there's so much focus on AI, and with AI can do the analysis. Like AI can give you analysis at scale, right? So I think bringing in the human element is going to be super important, and I think our jobs as data leaders are going to be more about building consensus, selling ideas, hypothesizing and proving something with these human connections is going to be more important than ever before.
Yeah, something that I've been thinking about a lot. I'm currently writing an article about how AI is impacting the way that we communicate. And something that I've considered is AI has made it possible to accelerate and optimize the way we write emails, that we write text messages, Slack messages. But what it cannot yet optimize is our verbal communication to each other. That's the thing that people are going to seek. Because when an executive is going to make a high stakes decision, they're not going to go to their AI and say, what should I do? They're going to talk to people in the room and say, what should I do? And listen to them. The ability of those people to speak on the spot clearly and concisely with their area of expertise and their voice spontaneously is going to determine what that executive does and who that executive trusts. So verbal communication, on the spot speaking, spontaneous impromptu speaking is going to be even more important as AI continues to proliferate in the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, English is not my first language. Initially, when ChatGPT came along, I'm like, okay, I can just use this, at least in my emails and all of that. But I soon realized it kind of takes away something, maybe the soul of the communication, right? So, although it makes it really easy, it also takes away a little bit of humanity in a lot of ways, or a little bit of me in the email. So I think it's really important for us to, how do you balance that, right? So if you're struggling with grammar or sentence structure, use that to kind of think about how you present it versus just dumping it into ChatGPT and sending that as an email, or like you said, preparing to talk to your executive in a verbal communication setting in a meeting. It's a delicate balance how much you use AI to dictate how your conversation is going to be, and also how much, yeah, AI cannot help you when you're talking to people face to face.
I recommend AI usually as a partner and not as a crutch or a replacement for you. What I see too often these days is a lot of professionals using it for everything. To write a script for their entire presentation, to generate all the slides, then where are you anymore in all of that?
Right.
But as you indicated, there is a way to balance that and to use it as a partner. If you are trying to use it to refresh on your understanding of the language to make sure you get something correct, it's a good reference, but it should not replace everything that you do. I'm working with someone now who is a non-native English speaker, and her question to me was, how should I structure my sentences if I'm unfamiliar with the grammar like a native English speaker is? And I said, the thing that I found with her in her particular case was she was trying to sound more expert and more authoritative because she wanted to impress. And that's the thing I want people to avoid. I don't want you to speak in a more elevated way just to fit in and just to sound better. Speak like yourself, what you're comfortable with, and that's what will come naturally. So I said to her, a very concise way to communicate that everyone will appreciate is just say subject, verb, and object. I am doing this. That's very clear. Use short, concise sentences. Executives don't want to hear you going on and on and on about different things in tangential directions with complicated sentence structure. Stick simple, speak naturally, and use ChatGPT as you need to update that and reference it, but don't use it to completely replace what you're trying to say.
No, 100%. I think it resonates with me a lot because early on in my career, I kind of did that, right? So, hey, English is not my most strongest suit. Also, I mean, even technically, I wasn't really good. You tend to use big words or big, hard technical terms just so you can come across as an expert. But people can tell, one, but also it doesn't feel natural, right? So I think over the years, communicating and relating to the person, like you said before, whoever they are, whether it's an executive or a product leader or a engineer or a customer care a person, you have to. The goal is to communicate your ideas and not to sound impressive, Because if you do that well, if the work speaks for itself when you communicate, if the ideas can get through, that's more impressive than using big words.
And I'll add to that and I'll say, when we're speaking to people, we can at a very instinctual level tell if you're being authentic and genuine. And something related to that is the delay that happens when we speak. If people try to talk in a very complicated expert fashion, there's going to be a large delay between their thought and then their actual execution. And that will make the person feel, oh, maybe they're not being completely transparent in what they're trying to express to me. Just speaking naturally, intuitively, is what makes people feel, okay, this person is just speaking what's on their mind, what they feel. They're not trying to hide something from me.
That's a really, I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, that sounds very true. Um, Amazing. Mm, let's talk about building consensus, right? So I think it's becoming more important in this world of, unless you're a CEO or the board of a company, I would suggest, and I would hope not everybody's doing this, but being just saying, hey, this is I want what I want and just go do this is not a really good way to lead, whether it's leading your team or leading your peers or managing upwards. I think building consensus and making a case for your ideas are really key. What are some of your um, tips or things that you've learned about building consensus, bringing people along?
I give a tip regarding the difference between passive, aggressive, and assertive communication. And I'll tell a story related to this. I was working with a client, and her major concern for me was her struggle with speaking on the spot. And the reason she had a struggle speaking on the spot was she was afraid of her boss. Her boss was a very critical person. She was working at Amazon at the time, and within the culture of her team, her boss had a very authoritative leadership style. So as you were saying, this is what you do, I'm not going to take no for an answer. She was afraid to communicate because her personality was antithetical to that. She's a naturally more empathetic person, a more collaborative person, and that there was just a lot of tension there. So she asked me, how should I communicate to this person when they're just telling me what to do and I can't really refuse that? I said there is a difference between passive, aggressive, and assertive communication. Passive communication is what she was leaning to at the moment, which was, okay, maybe I can do that. Let me see if I can just do this. Very hesitant language, hedging language that makes it seem like you're just going to do what the other person says. Now, there are consequences to that. And there are also advantages. The advantage is you don't have to deal with the problem. You just do what the other person says. You create harmony in the environment. But the consequence is you are not able to do what you want. The other pole is aggressive communication. Now here, the other person can experience the consequences. As we see in the case of her boss talking down to her. If you are overly aggressive with someone, you may get your way. That's the advantage. But the disadvantage is you may lose the relationship because now you've rubbed them the wrong way. Assertive communication is something that seeks to balance those two extremes. With assertive communication, you can be direct, but you can also be respectful. There's a term for this in business called radical candor, and there's also a book that accompanies that. And the thesis of the book is you can have candor, you can be honest, and you can be radical and disruptive with it, but you can still be respectful in the way you deliver that. And balancing all those things allows you to state what you want, but also respect the other person has an opinion. When you do all those things, people feel included. They understand what you want them to do still as a leader, but you create a more collaborative atmosphere. That's the balance that I hope more leaders strike.
I think that's a really important topic of communication. Could you give us an example about how do you what does it look like in the real world?
Yeah, of course. So let's do a mock session now. Let's say you're a leader on your team. What's something that you would tell your team members about, like a directive?
Direct report. So yeah, I've been thinking about performance reviews. It's the beginning
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
year, right?
yeah.
So that's something that's on my mind. And one of my team members is really, I think one of the things that I and them, all of us are not good at is just doing the documentation, right? Like so
Hmm.
many of us where we just don't document really well. I mean, I've learned over time that it's important and it's key, but we just want to do our thing and just go on to the next one. But it's really important to document so that we not end up doing the same things again and again. So I think that's something I want to communicate to my team.
Yeah. So we can go through that in various extremes of communication. So first is passive. If you wanted to deliver the message to work on documentation to a team member, a passive way to do that would be, oh, hey, I noticed you're doing a really great job with all your work. The coding is fantastic and all that. Documentation is something maybe you should look at it as well. So that would be a really subtle and a way to indicate to them they should work on documentation. They might not get that message at all. All they heard was you're doing a great job.
Yeah.
And the other end of the extreme is aggressive communication, where you say, your documentation is horrible, go fix it or you're fired. Something like that. Of course, some companies that might be the case. Now, assertive communication would be a way where you are direct yet respectful. And a framework I recommend to do that is known as situation behavior impact. You talk about a situation, a very specific situation the person has been in. You describe that situation to them so you're both on the same page, objective data. Then you say, here's the behavior I noticed that you did in that situation, and here was the impact on that. After that, you say, how can we work on that together? So example, I noticed that in the last project, the documentation that you wrote up, and then you describe the behavior, the documentation didn't have as much detail as the stakeholder wanted. The impact of that was the stakeholder was confused. We weren't able to advance the project as much as we wanted. Now, let's talk about ways where we can make sure the documentation is updated in the future to whatever standard that you've set. In that way, yes, it's direct, but you're still respectful of the other person. You've opened the conversation up to hear their perspective, and you want to understand how they would be proactive in fixing the problem.
Yeah, that's a really good way to balance both assertive and passive um, set of communication. Um, Had something on my mind. I think, yeah, I mean, like you said, situation, behavior, and impact. I think it takes away from saying, hey, you are the problem, to
Mm,
giving a specific scenario. Hey, this thing that we did was the problem, and not really, it's not the entire person. You as a person is just one thing um, within what the whole, just improve that 2% and we'll be great.
exactly. Yeah, the thing that often happens when it comes to feedback is we take it personally. And when you take it personally, you're unable to let go of ego. You don't want to work on it. But if you can distance from that as much as possible by saying, here's the situation, the behavior, and the impact, you say, here's one very specific action that you took that we can update. It's not all of you as a person, as you said, that needs to be fixed. That's what lets people be more receptive to actually fixing it.
Amazing. Yeah, I think the balance and nuances are so key when communicating. Mm, I know we kind of alluded to this in the past, especially in role of data communicating. How do you What's the difference between informing, persuading, and aligning?
Hmm. With data, if we just show what's going on, like this is the sales that went up 90%, that's great. But we also need to, as you said, persuade and align. We need to tell people what to do about that information and align with what they know and what they prioritize, what their pain is. So for that 90% increase, where did we start? Did we start at a really low point and then the 90% increase is very minimal? Or did we start at a high point and now we're reaching our goals? So when you put things into context when it comes to data communication, then it's clear why things matter. Perhaps, let's say, as in another example, we made $10,000 in sales last quarter. Okay, great. That's just the what. Now, why is that important? Well, last quarter, the previous quarter before that, we made only $1. Now the $10,000 seems incredibly significant. Why did that happen? We can go into the root causes. Maybe we had a new marketing campaign or new product, and that's what we should continue doing to make more money for the company. Alternatively, if you were to say we made $10,000 last quarter and the quarter before that we made $1 million, something is horribly wrong. Now I need to indicate to you, align with your priority and pain, which would be what happened? Why are we doing so poorly now? And let's fix that so it doesn't happen in the quarter that follows this one.
That's true. Let's talk about public speaking. I know you do such a good job, and you're an expert in teaching people how to do it well. So I'd love to learn from you. Why is communication anxiety so common among technical leaders in general, and more so in a public speaking setting?
I'd say for technical leaders specifically, our mindset is very technical as well. We like things to go as we planned. But what often happens in public speaking is things don't go according to plan. And one very unfortunate case of that was in a keynote I gave last year. It was abroad in Portugal. It was a communication skills keynote. I had everything prepared, all my slides, I had all the talking points and the talk track. I was going through it, everything was going perfectly. And then on the stage, I could feel in my stomach there was this pain. I had just eaten lunch before this portion of the keynote, so I said, okay, maybe I didn't eat something that my stomach agreed with. So I was like, okay, maybe that will go away. Let me just keep going. I need to get through this because this is important. Then the pain starts to intensify, and then I start to see blurriness in my vision. I start to get lightheaded, and I say, okay, I can't ignore this anymore. I can't will this away with sheer willpower. So now I need to do something about this. This is going to require me to go off script. So I said, all right, everybody, I am not feeling well. I need to go to the bathroom. In the meantime, we're going to segue to a group activity where you implement what I just taught you. So I went to the bathroom. I came back. I felt much better. It was food poisoning. And everything went fine after that. Nobody batted an eye. If you handle a situation with grace and composure and you adapt as needed, everybody's going to respect the fact you can't anticipate everything, bad things happen. We all had a laugh about it after the keynote. They said, yeah, can't believe that happened in the middle of something so important. But because I handled it, and because we had a successful event afterwards, nobody's going to remember that except for the fact that it was handled.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think I'm so glad you handle it really well, and that's a really good example of it. And I think like you said, we think about everything everything has to go so perfectly, like as it is in my head. So I think that's not real life. That's not. I think all of us technical leaders are a bit of control freaks and want things to go as we have in our minds.
For many of the clients I work with who are technical leaders, that is the number one thing that we tackle from lesson 1 that I have with them, is we need to let go of the mindset of perfection, because perfection is not possible in communication. Communication, especially verbal communication, by nature is messy and improvisational. It's not like writing, which AI can automate to be perfect. But in speaking, it's on the spot. You're required to come up with something instantaneously. It's going to be a little messy and you're not going to find the best idea. You have to work with whatever you have. And that's what I teach, is to adapt to whatever your mind gives to you, adapt to the situation, adapt to your audience. Especially in some presentations, I'm talking about something, it's not clicking. So I say, okay, we need to change gears. This is something I didn't prepare, but because my audience wants something else, I have to give that to them. So being able to adapt is a key skill for communication, and that's something that I work with technical leaders to a great extent with.
That's very important. Do you know Yeah, and I know you work with a lot of leaders who are not native English speakers, who are probably bilingual or trilingual. Speaking of myself, I feel like there are multiple languages running in my head every time, and me having to find the best words or sentence structures in a way that sits well with English. What are the tips for non-native speakers, or is there a framework to think about?
What I do, especially with some clients I'm working with now who are non-native English speakers, is it's very important to diagram visually what you know. This is not something that we do, but if you can think about it like this, when we're speaking, all these thoughts are going through our head that we cannot see. So it's hard to fix something that you cannot see. What if you could put all of that down on a piece of paper? Create a mind map, for example, a diagram. Here's a topic I usually speak on. Let's say it's software engineering. Let me diagram all the things I know related to software engineering. I can see it in one place. I can see what gaps I have, so I can fill in those gaps. Then if someone asks me about software engineering, I know what to pull in because I can see it. As another example, when it comes to vocabulary, like you mentioned, you want to find the right word to express your intent. Take a word or a concept that you need to talk about. Let's say it's the concept of something being previous. So you put the word previous, you diagram that. Okay, what synonyms are there related to previous? Beforehand, maybe preceding, and then you can do some things related to that. So the concept of something being after, subsequent, consequent. If you do that for every typical concept you need to talk about, suddenly you have all this rich treasure trove of associations to work with visually. You can see what gaps exist, you can fill them in. So the biggest advice I would give to anyone listening, non-native speaker or native speaker, is to visually diagram your knowledge and your vocabulary so that you can fill in those gaps and be proactive about it.
Yeah, that's very powerful. I think spending some time to think about and building a mind map of, or even put it on a paper or a document, the concepts and creating that visually is, I think that will be super important. I hadn't thought about that, right? So I typically just write it down. That's helpful, but probably visualizing maybe even more powerful.
The thing that is advantageous about this approach is it aligns with the way a lot of us as technical people think. We like charting things out and being precise. But the other advantage of it is it develops associative thinking. When we just write what we want to say, like in a script, that's for one instance only. But if you chart out your knowledge and find all the associations between different related topics, you start to see creative connections between things you didn't see before. Then in the next conversation, you can bring those associations in. You're no longer stuck, but you can see all the corners of your mind.
That's very true. That's very true. And yeah, we love charts, don't we?
Yes.
Cool. Let's talk about your TEDx experience and some of the lessons that you may have learned. What motivated you to pursue a TEDx talk, and how did that come about?
When I was younger, I was the shyest, most introverted person in my high school, by far, at large. I couldn't muster the courage or the willpower to talk to anyone, teacher, let alone a classmate. And I had this dream of mine. And one day I could overcome that and I could give a TEDx talk one day. That was my earliest dream. So fast forward many years, I say to myself, I need to work on this skill. A teacher told me in high school, Chris, you have such brilliant ideas, you have great hard work ethic, but if you do not communicate, people will never see that. So she inspired me to really, really hone in on working on this skill. I began to practice every single day, recording myself, watching it back, seeing what I can improve. I watched videos of people, I read books, and over time, I noticed that I was improving because I was practicing and I was actually doing it. When it eventually came time for me 2 years ago to apply for a TEDx event, I had some imposter syndrome. I said, okay, I've never done something as big as this before. Maybe I shouldn't even apply. They'll just reject me. But I said, no, I had a good feeling about this. The theme of the event was rethinking innovation. It was looking for experts who have creatively combined different fields. And for me, the biggest life journey I underwent was a combination between my music and my data fields of expertise. So I said, this is perfect. I applied and I was accepted. I was incredibly shocked that I was. And I gave a TEDx talk in August of 2024. It was one of the most momentous moments of my life because I looked back and I said, I did overcome that past challenge I faced of being shy and introverted. Now I'm speaking on a stage to people all around the world. And now I hope to inspire and encourage others to go on a similar journey for themselves.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think it was momentous both professionally and personally for you. That's amazing. What surprised you about the presentation process itself? Was there help from the was there help and collaboration from TEDx itself?
There was. I don't know about all the events, but for the one I spoke at, TEDx Logan Circle in DC, there was a tremendous amount of support. I worked with a team of 3 or 4 coaches who listened to my talk, gave feedback. That is invaluable. To get that many diverse perspectives in one room, letting you know how you can improve, I was very grateful for that. It lets me take the talk to another level I didn't even expect. And to get perspectives about the pacing, about the content, about if they understood it, that was so important because when we do anything, whether it's communication or something technical, we get lost in the weeds because it's too close to us. We did it. So we can't be objective anymore and say, here's what's wrong. I was able to see that with the feedback from my coaches. And I would recommend for anyone who's working on communication or presentation, get as much feedback as possible.
Amazing. What's one feedback that you have brought with you from your TEDx talk?
The biggest piece of feedback that I got was related to managing my nerves and pacing. Because I was so nervous to impress these coaches, this was the first time I presented to such an audience in a private setting. I said, okay, I need to impress them. I need to knock their socks off with how good this is. So I spoke so fast, they could barely understand what I was saying. And I reflected on the situation and I said, yes, I did not manage my nerves properly. I teach this to my clients, but to implement it myself, that's my blind spot. So I worked on myself. I worked on regulating my emotions, worked on rehearsing the speech so well that I could say it even now to you probably if I was required to. And with all that preparation, emotionally and content-wise, I was able to go on the stage on the big day and not have those nerves and speak at the pace that I wanted. So that's the piece of feedback I'll always carry.
That's amazing and super important for public speaking. Great. And how has it impacted how did the TEDx talk impact your business and career? Has it, for instance, I think it's been more than a year now, a couple years.
I wouldn't be able to say its direct impact from a causal standpoint, but I will say it has given a degree of recognition. And something that I teach when it comes to communication, especially when you're talking to leaders, is it's important to get social validation. TEDx, for me, is a form of social validation. It's saying, hey, this external organization trusts this person. In the same way, when we communicate to leaders, we would like to demonstrate the same. It's not just me telling you this is my recommendation. I have people who you trust who are recommending this as well. That makes your argument much stronger. So I would say that aspect has helped me professionally, and that's what I also recommend to people who are pursuing something similar.
Yeah, I think social proof is important part of our work. Where does AI help in technical communication? I know we touched on this a little bit before, but generally, I know you said think of AI as your partners. How do you use it on a daily basis?
Yeah. For me, I'm currently writing a book on communication skills and influence skills, persuasion skills. And I am often asked when I bring this up, how much are you using AI to write the book? And my answer to them is as little as possible. The only instance I'll use AI is if I'm stuck brainstorming. Then I go to AI and say, hey, I'm stuck. I'm trying to think of X thing. Give me some ideas. Then I am the one who chooses the idea eventually. It's still my product, it's still my thought process, but I'm using AI to help me get out of my blind spot. That's the only thing I will ever use AI for in this writing process. I want, when I write this book or when I communicate to anyone, for it to be my voice entirely. Yes, it's going to take longer. AI could make that 10 times faster probably, but I want this to come from me. I want when people read this book for it to feel like a conversation with my thoughts and my ideas, not something that's been optimized. Yes, it might be more messy, but that's what I want. And the same thing would be true for when we communicate in business. I would recommend that when you communicate, yes, we can use AI to optimize our emails and whatever it is, but we have to apply the critical thinking at the end to say, yes, I approve of this output, or no, this no longer sounds like me. We still have to be part of the process. That's how I'd recommend using AI.
Yeah, I think like we talked about, to you put it very well, where you're still leading the conversation, you're still leading the idea space. You're just getting AI to help you get unstuck or the last few steps in the way if you need it. If you just use AI in the beginning, and you could kind of use AI to brainstorm, but you still have to pick something that resonates with you the most and then develop on your own versus just use AI everywhere.
Absolutely. I think one dangerous way to view AI is don't use it at all because it's clear it's going to stay here for a very long time. And you would put you at a disadvantage to not know how to use it. But use it well and wisely. I relate AI or any other technology like social media similar to something like junk food. Yes, it's nice to indulge in it once in a while, but don't have it all the time. Be proactive about using it purposefully and don't get lost in using it all the time.
Amazing. Really good and important tip for viewers. So I know we've been talking about originality or authenticity and AI. What's the best way to? I think that's a struggle that a lot of people will have, right? So how do I still be authentic when using AI? We talked a little bit about, hey, when to use AI, how to use AI. Are there any things that you see leaders doing it the wrong way, and some examples of other leaders doing it the right way?
I would give an example that I gave in a recent keynote about how to use AI the right way. Rather than thinking of it as a way to just simplify manual repetitive tasks, think of it as the thought partner that we've been talking about. Have it be that person, unjudgmental person in the room who can tell you what gaps that you missed. So for example, I'll recommend to leaders, if you're going to give a presentation, use AI not to design the whole thing for you. You can use it to supplement what you do. But once you've created the thing, ask AI, tell me what I missed. Pretend to be my audience, act as my audience of executives or technical team. Tell me what they would think if they heard this presentation. Would they be inspired for my call to action? Would they not be as inspired? How can I improve my presentation to fill in those spaces? That's what AI is really good at, is letting you see your blind spots.
That's a really cool example. Kind of use AI as your sounding board, or get some feedback.
Because often we don't have access to that kind of person in our professional circle, someone who will take as much time as they want to review our presentation and give honest feedback. That's what AI can do. And of course, we have to prompt AI and say, hey, be critical with this. Don't just give me the nice, sweet version that you do by default, but be critical with me. That's what's really useful.
Don't glaze me, AI.
Yes.
Yeah, I think yeah, prompting is really key to just say, hey, do not do not just agree with me. Be more critical. I'm here to learn. Are there specific AI tools that you use or for communication, or is ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude one of those help you well?
I'd say when it comes to brainstorming for things like my book, I'll use ChatGPT. When it comes to teaching AI for communication, I'll work with whatever the company has. So, one company I worked with recently to teach data storytelling, their company uses Gemini. So I said, okay, here's how you could use Gemini to prompt, create images for the data, visualizations that you want, give you ideas, not necessarily do all the work for you. And that usually is what determines how I teach, is what the company uses.
Yeah, that's a really good way to think about it. In your mind, what when a company goes through this transition, you go there and tell them the importance of communication skills or data, not just data but data storytelling. What does the ideal world look like? What changes when communication becomes the first class citizen in a data organization?
The biggest change I like to see post training is very simple. I want people to have the three whats in their communication. Not just what is going on, which is what communication usually stays at, just the data, what it says. I want to see in the communication following, I'm also telling you why it matters. So I'm providing the context we talked about before. Why does the data point that I mentioned, why is it so significant? And then the last point, the most important one, what do we do about it? Often when it comes to data presentation, I see them limited to updates. Here is what we found. But what's more important and much more aligned with leadership is saying not just why it matters, but here's what I recommend you do. That's what turns data teams from being cost centers to profit centers. Now you're actually providing value to the business that's forward thinking.
Yeah, I think that's a really big struggle for data teams. We often, and we're being honest when we think this, but we think of ourselves as cost centers, and we are. But the biggest push or biggest goal is to kind of become those profit center, become those people that go beyond dashboards or data pipelines and go to becoming an important part of the organization who's kind of delivering actual business value versus just being report runners or dashboard creators.
Data teams have such potential because they have access to information from all these departments in the company. They can pull creative insights that can dictate how companies can improve to a very significant scale. I I feel bad seeing data teams limited to just being cost centers because they can be so much more. And that's why the skill of storytelling and communication I teach, I feel, can really assist with that mission.
Yeah, especially with like the theme comes back and again. Some of the technical analysis and technical coding can be offloaded to AI. So
Mhm.
it's becoming more democratic, right? So the analysis is becoming more democratic. So I think we have to go learn the storytelling aspect and not just live in the data world because that's becoming no, it's not going to go away, of course, but it's becoming more accessible to everybody, right? Which is great, which is amazing. So we have to go to other areas, data storytelling, building consensus, collaborating. So I think those human skills, soft skills, what we refer to as soft skills, are going to become more important as this happens.
Absolutely. AI has dominated the digital space. It's got that hands down. We need to dominate the non digital spaces in between. That's our
Yeah,
goal.
that's very profound. Yeah, we have to we have to lead the human connections. We have to
Mhm.
lead the human aspects of our business building. What's your vision for leaders who can pair insight with influence? What does it look like when they do that?
I'll give an example of what this could look like. It would boil down to the point we talked about before when it comes to meeting an audience where they are. That's when you can deliver an insight and have influence. There was one talk I was giving to open a conference, and it was on presentation skills, something that I usually talk about to great length in many, many settings. What would have been easy to do is just give the same presentation I always do. But something that I promised to myself early on when I started public speaking is don't go on autopilot because every audience needs something different. So I customized this presentation to the audience. It was a group of audit professionals, a field I didn't know much about beforehand. So I did the work to understand what this audience's pains and priorities are, as we talked about earlier in the podcast. And that let me know what case studies and examples to include. Delivering that presentation was that much more impactful because it used things they know and care about. And I was approached by people afterwards who said, I can't believe you don't have an audit background. And that showed to me that the key to influence really is speaking people's language. That's how you connect, and that's how you have an impact.
That's a really, I think that's one thing that I'm going to bring with me from this conversation, take with me from this conversation, right? So it's how do you humanize your analysis? How do you, I think probably providing an example, having a key character, what we talk about in filmmaking or what we learn in filmmaking and storytelling outside of our professional corporate jobs is key, right? So you have a main character, you're taking the audience through their journey and from their lens. I think that'll be so powerful. In addition to the data, which we're also good at, right? So, hey, this is happening, and this is not just an anecdote, one single example, but that ties you can bring your emotional core and your data insights. Hey, this is not just happening to one person, but this is happening at a scale that is not just a handful of stories.
Exactly. One tip I usually give that's a little bit different from the usual to work on communication is to read stories or observe yourself as you're consuming entertainment. We all consume entertainment to some extent. We watch movies, we're on TikTok, we go on YouTube to watch longer form videos. When you watch those things, it's important to reflect, what is catching my attention? It's usually going to be some character going through a pain, transforming as a result of the journey, and emerging with some impact and lesson learned at the end. That's what engages our attention. The reason why audiences often tune out and just get bored listening to data presentations is it doesn't have any of that. We need to bring those lessons from other media, from storytelling, from videos, to the data world so that we can not only say something important, but make sure that people understand it and want to take action on it.
Yeah. I think that's really important. Do you think, do you see your 3 Watt or 3W framework as kind of the 3-part structure? Is that analogous in some ways?
I'd say it's similar but not complete in the sense that you could structure a presentation to say what's going on, why it matters, what to do about it. But a framework I use to teach storytelling is more along these lines. You start with the context, so you talk about the data. You build up to a cusp, so you talk about, in a sense, why it matters, why this is so important. You indicate the problem and its agitation, so people feel compelled to act on it. And then you relieve that tension with the conclusion and the solution. So yes, the 3 Watt structure gives you the ingredients to do that, but organizing it in the shape of an arc with the narrative momentum and the emotional momentum going to a peak and then subsiding, that's what creates a compelling story.
That's really promising for me. Yeah, I'm gonna take that with me. I know we're coming to the top of the hour, so this is one of our staple questions here. Dream state for AI, right? So if money and resources were not constraints, what kind of AI models or data models would you build, and what would you do with it?
I give to every leader an AI model that they could type in what they're working on, especially when it comes to communication, and get the critical, honest feedback that we talked about earlier. That I think is one of the most invaluable things that we don't often have enough of, is critical, honest feedback. I want AI to fill that gap for us, unjudgmentally.
Amazing. And I think there's a large consensus that, hey, I don't want to see myself, I don't want to look at myself after I've recorded, right? So I think I think we're doing a disservice to ourselves if it's horrible to begin with, but I think we need to get over that hump.
Yes, I frame it usually like this. If you record yourself, you're able to see exactly what your audience is going to see. You're able to hear exactly what they're going to hear. Why not make that an honest reflection of yourself? That way, you can show all of you in your best form to your audience. Recording is uncomfortable, yes, but essential.
So you're saying watching just myself, videos of myself is not really narcissistic. It's
Not at
just
all.
learning.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, maybe it could be both. Yeah, but I think it's really key because that's a really direct form of feedback that we can get for free in today's world, right? So I think it's important to take advantage of that. No, I think appreciate you coming in and giving us so much insights about data storytelling, telling us about your experience with TEDx, and this was really fascinating and enlightening to me. Is there anything we've not covered that you wanted to add to our data and AI community?
I think we covered a really good series of topics. The thing I'd want to leave listeners with and viewers with is that last tip we gave to record yourself. The only way that you're going to get better at something is if you do it. So I know a lot of people ask me, what books can I read on communication? What videos should I watch? I tell them, you need to practice. It's like learning swimming. You're not going to learn swimming if you read about swimming or you watch people swim. You're going to learn swimming when you actually go in the water and you swim. So I tell people you need to swim, you need to practice communication, watch yourself back, get critical, honest feedback. That's the way to improve.
It's amazing. Yeah. No, thank you so much. Appreciate you, Chris. It was fascinating, and I had so much fun.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you.